The story that I have today is a story that was collected by the Grimm brothers. Uh, it is called The White Snake. And it starts with a king. Uh, uh, a king that was famous because he was so incredibly wise. It seemed that he knew everything in the whole country, and no one knew how that came. Well, it was said there was this servant, this very trusted servant, uh, that brought him every day a covered shell. And not even the servant knew what was under that shell, um, under that cover. So when the servant was gone, the king took this little part of a white snake and he ate it with taste. It was a nice piece of meat. One day, the servant became so curious that he couldn't resist. He had to check what was under there, and he saw that snake, and it looked so yummy. He took a bite, and as soon as he swallowed it, he could hear the birds talk through the open window, like they spoke just his same language, his own language. Well, that was weird. He didn't know what happened. Well, a couple of days later, obviously it still worked. The queen lost her ring. And well, there was only one person, except for the king, in the whole palace that could have taken it. There was only one servant trusted enough to have access to every space in the palace. So obviously, he would be the person that took the ring. So his head would be chopped off unless he would brought back the ring. Well, all he knew was that he didn't take it. And when he walked the palace garden, probably for the last time in his life, he heard two ducks talk to each other. And one said, "Well, I have something heavy on my stomach. I don't know what I had, but it doesn't feel right." And then he had a hunch. He caught the duck, brought it to the kitchen, and told the cook to prepare the animal for dinner. And there on the table, on the dinner table, the servant chopped the meat for the king and the queen, and there was the ring. Of course, the king felt pretty awkward about accusing his most trusted servant. So he decided to reward him, and he could have any position in court. He could be a minister if he wanted to. He could be anything. But the servant, well, he didn't feel so safe anymore. So he asked for a horse and some travel money, and he got it. And he got out. And on his horse, he wandered through the kingdom and through the next kingdom. And after a couple of weeks, he came uh, uh, near a pond. And well, they say fish are stum, but now he definitely heard some fish talk to each other, and and they sounded pretty alarming. And he got nearer and nearer, and there he saw them being stuck into the reeds and almost ready to drown because, well, it's with fish the other way around, right? They drown when there's no water. So he helped the fish to open water. And they bubbled something like, "Thank you very much," or something similar. I wasn't there, right? So it's just my imagination that. So The servant went on, and he enjoyed his trip very much, and he met several people and ladies and saw whatever there was to see. And then he heard very, 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 very tiny voices, and he looked around, and it was a bunch of ants. They were afraid for the big hoofs of the horse, and a bit angry that people were just stumbling everywhere with those big animals and the big hoofs, and they will just on the ants. Of course, they couldn't survive that. And hearing that, the servant steered his horse around the ants, and they said a very high pitched "thank you," and he went on again. The trip went on, and then he heard in a far distance some angry raven. They were talking to their offspring. "If you keep eating and eating and eating and eating, I can fly on and off and on and off. Well, you're big enough now to do it by yourself." And they just pushed their chicklets over the edge of the nest. There the chicklets were on the path right in front of the horse. And they looked so hungry. And they told each other, like, "Oh, we are so hungry now. We will probably die. And we never even became adult birds. Oh, how rotten our parents are. We will die here. We will starve." Well, and the servant, who was an incredible animal lover, he dismounted his horse, took his sword and killed his horse to feed the little chicklets. Well, there's something in the story here that I don't understand either, but animal lover he was. He fed his horse to the raven, and he went on. Now we had to walk. So now the story goes a little slower because he had to walk all the way. And he walked into a next kingdom, came to a city, a big city, and there was a princess. And that princess, she was a looker. And well, nowadays we look to what is the personality of the princess, and is she a bit empathic, and how much does she love her parents, and how much does she stay indoors when there's corona or whatever. But this is an old story, and then people came. Well, they looked at how someone looked. It was completely superficial, just the outside. That was what counted, and well, maybe the fact that she was a princess, that might have helped. But the servant, well, he wanted her. He wanted her badly, very badly. But then he had to be tested. And the first test was that she went to the sea, she took off her golden ring, she threw it into the sea, and she said, "Okay, within the hour, you will enter the water, and you will stay underwater until you find the ring. When you come up with the ring, we will throw you back in, just as often as you need to find the ring." Okay. So he walked the beach, thinking and thinking how to do that. And he walked, and he walked back, and he walked up and down and up and down the beach. But he didn't come up with an idea. And then suddenly there were some fish. And with their fishy nose, they pushed a shell up to the beach. He opened the shell, and that was the ring. So he said, okay, it is time. I will now jump to water. He had the ring already in his hand. He jumped to water, came up again, and said, here is the ring. Then he had to tell about himself, and the princess heard he was just a servant. Well, that was not good enough. So she said, I'm sorry, but you have to do a second test. In the meantime, I let Mike in so he can hear the last part of the story. The princess, she had 10 bags of barley, and she spread it all out in the garden, and he had until sunrise to refill the 10 bags with barley again. Well, he just went to sleep and thought, okay, tomorrow I will lose my head. But when he woke up next morning, he saw 10 bags filled with barley and some proud ants crawling around it. Thank you very much for our lives. Here's the barley in the bags. Well, then there was his last test. He had to come back with one fruit from the tree of life. The tree of life? Well, he heard some fairy tales. Well, I heard some fairy tales, but I wouldn't know where to find. And he didn't even have a horse, because that is what he fed to the raven. So he walked to the east, and he walked to the west, and to the north, and to the south, and every angle in between. And he came back completely frustrated. It was already 3 years later. And then, when he was completely without hope to ever come back with the fruit from the tree of life, a golden apple fell from the sky right into his lap. And there was the raven. They thanked him for the meat that he gave them. And with the apple from the tree of life, he went back to the princess. And she looked at him and she thought, oh my God, is he ugly? But I better marry him, because otherwise I am an unfaithful princess. And you never know what happens with unfaithful princesses. I better marry him. And there was the wedding. And what a wedding it was. And since that day, you can see, well, princes and princesses, they marry over borders. And when you look at the television, at the news, and you see any program about any monarchy, you see that all the offspring are so incredibly ugly, and that it's probably because they are descendants of that ugly servant. Well, that is the story. Thank you.